Okay, Maggie, I'm going to get started.
Perfect, Pat.
Okay. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 2021 REI John Komanecki Symposium. My name is Patrick Fogarty. I'm the chairperson of the Real Estate Institute. REI was organized in 1972. And our mission is to promote education, professionalism, ethics, and communication to professionals within the real estate industry, and to share our vision through our collective service and affiliation with the College of Business at Stony Brook University. First and foremost, none of this is possible without the assistance of our executive director, Maggie Palermo. Maggie manages our communications, our reports, our interactions with students, teachers, and the Stony Brook administration. Maggie organizes and handles the details of all our events. And as with today, Maggie coordinates all the details with our symposium committee and panelists. She does it so very well. We thank you, Maggie. I also wish to thank our symposium committee chair, Ed Gutlieber, who has, along with his team, put in many hours developing today's content and arranging for our esteemed panelists to share their experiences with IDA-supported projects. I would also like to thank our student interns, Dan Mavrogan and Greg Slater. They manage our social media platforms throughout the year, and they have done excellent work in sharing information and content that is both topical and important to the industry. A brief background on REI. Our organization is comprised of 49 directors who hold senior positions in their areas of expertise. Examples of that experience include banking, law, insurance, architecture, planning, development, construction management, accounting, leasing, brokerage, appraisal, environmental science, affordable housing, and media. We operate on annual assessments to each director and sponsorships from their companies, and we have non-affiliated organizations that appreciate the work we do and the services we provide, and we receive sponsorship from those as well. We are grateful for your support, and I wish to thank each of our sponsors, including in our diamond sponsor category, we have Bethpage Federal Credit Union, SIBS, Flushing Bank, Friedman LLP, New York Community Bank, and Ridgewood Savings Bank. Our platinum sponsors include Burden LLP, Combined Resources Consulting and Design, Cullen and Dykeman, Farrell Fritz, the Gito Group, Jaspen Schlesinger, Merit Engineering Consultants, and Sterling National Bank. Our gold sponsors include C.A. Rich Environmental Consultants, Sir Tillman Ballin Adler and Hyman, Daniel Gale Sotheby's International Realty, the Damianos Realty Group, Engel Berman, Forcelli Deegan Tirana, Grutius and Company, H2M, Jovia, Laser Aptecker, Rosella and Yedid, Lewis Lefkowitz Realty, Maspeth Federal Savings, Mazers, Murphy and Lynch, NAI Long Island, Rampart Insurance Services, RD Geronimo, Signature Bank, Tritech, Valley, and VHB. Our silver sponsors include Coach Realtors, Son Ward Koshignano, and VRPR. Our last webinar for the winter was sponsored by Standard Valuation Services and GCP Capital. And our webinar sponsors for today include Cushman Wakefield, Rampart Insurance Services, Farrell Fritz, Meyer Swazi English and Klein, New York Community Bank, Stewart Title, and Tritech. Your sponsorships go directly to the services we provide. Those include direct classroom education to undergraduate students, career mentoring workshops, hard hat construction tours, internships, and scholarships funded through an application process with the Dean's Office at the College of Business in coordination with the Stony Brook Foundation. Following my opening remarks today, our Vice Chair, Michelle Pincus, and Manny London, the Dean at the College of Business, will recognize our 2 scholarship recipients, and you'll hear directly from them about their successful paths at Stony Brook University. I want to thank you all in attendance. I am sure you'll find our discussion today to be of great interest. And with that, I'd like to turn the program over to our Vice Chair, Michelle Pincus.
Good morning. I'm Michelle Pincus, Vice Chair of the Real Estate Institute and Chair of the Scholarship Committee. I'd like to introduce Manny London, Dean of the College of Business, to say a few words this morning.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. Let's see, wait, start my video. Okay. I hope this is working now. It's great to be with you. And I do want to say how much we appreciate our affiliation with REI these 5, 6, 7 years. It's been very important to us because we are growing the College of Business. We're developing a great College of Business now with 40 faculty, 1,300 undergraduates, and just about 400 graduate students in our MBA, MS in Finance program, MS in Accounting program, and other programs like healthcare management and so forth. We have some great students and wonderful faculty. We've been building the college, and our relationship with REI is important for many reasons. It provides students with exposure to a major industry. It shows how we as a College of Business contribute to economic development on Long Island. And we need to have input from you as business associates in industry, in the region, to help us improve our curriculum, develop our curriculum. As you can see from these slides, we've taught many students, which has been wonderful. I appreciate Charlie Rich's course on the business of real estate. It's been quite successful, 60 or more students each time we've taught it. And I know that many of you have participated as guest speakers, students. You could see that you have raised over $62,000 of scholarship money for our students, which is fantastic. And we appreciate your donations. There's the slide that says $62,376,000 and 10 recipients since 2015. So, that's really excellent. We actually have some slides that show who these scholarship recipients are and have been and where they are now. Maggie worked hard to find out where they are, and you can see from this list that they are in the world of real estate, finance, and associated industries, risk management, insurance, and so forth. These people are a talent on Long Island. You might consider them for future opportunities in your businesses, as well as reaching out to our current students and graduates as potential talent, as interns and new hires to promote and develop your businesses on Long Island. The Sean Deary was on the previous slide, who is one of our recent scholarship recipients and very talented. And you can just see from the list of many others that these have been great people, and they certainly appreciate the scholarships that you've provided. And as Michelle said and Patrick said, we have 2 new scholarship recipients for this year, and I'm going to turn it over to Michelle to introduce them to you. Thank you.
Thank you. And as we've expressed, one of the missions of the Real Estate Institute is to support young professionals interested in entering the Long Island real estate industry. REI offers these scholarships each year to those full-time students in the College of Business who are interested in pursuing real estate as a career. This past year, we were fortunate enough to offer scholarships in excess of $10,000 to 2 very deserving undergraduate students. Both of these students possess the attributes that we look for in the selection of a candidate for this award. The first, Dan Mavrogan, is a business management major with a finance specialization. He's currently an intern with the Real Estate Institute and has previously interned with Daniel Gale Sotheby's International Realty. His goal is to pursue a career in the real estate industry while continuing to live on Long Island. He's planning to graduate this May, and he's with us this morning and would like to say a few words. With that, I will turn it over to Dan.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you for having me today. Just to share a little bit about my experience at Stony Brook. I started last spring as an undergraduate transfer student. As a transfer student, you kind of see it as a fresh start for everything. new friends, opportunities, experiences, and for me, above all, a new grade point average. During my first semester at Stony Brook, I was presented with a challenge to get into the College of Business. After meeting with an advisor, I realized I needed to raise my grade point average significantly before becoming eligible to apply to the business program. So after a long and unusual spring semester last year, I was able to attain the required GPA and submit an application to the business program. Getting accepted into the business program really opens a world of opportunities for me, which eventually led me to an internship at the Real Estate Institute. This internship has strengthened my business acumen and has shown me the different opportunities available for a student looking to pursue a career in real estate. So all of these challenges and experiences continue to pay off as I accept the scholarship award. And I want to thank the donors and board members of the Real Estate Institute for their generosity and benevolence in presenting me with the scholarship opportunity.
Thank you, Dan. Our second recipient is Francesca Arjana Zamora. Francesca is a business management major with a specialization in marketing. She's always had a passion for real estate since her mother works in the real estate industry. She also intends to pursue a career in real estate and is currently a junior at Stony Brook University. Francesca, please share a few words with us this morning.
Thank you, Michelle, for the introduction. Good morning, everyone. I'm Francesca Argueta, and I'm currently working towards a bachelor's degree in business management with a specialization in marketing. While my college experience began with a semester at Long Island University, I always knew that I would end up at Stony Brook. Their business program offers a high-level learning experience with an accomplished staff that I could not pass up on. I come from a family of business people who I admire greatly and who inspired me to pursue a future in business. As I finish school and enter the business world, I will pursue my goal of positive change in the way businesses work, working towards a comfortable environment for employees. This dream of mine could never come into fruition without my education, and I would like to thank the Real Estate Institute for supporting me and my future with this scholarship. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Francesca. It is truly an honor to help support the future of these students. We applaud them and our future leaders here on Long Island. Thank you for being with us this morning, and I turn it back to Pat.
Unmute. Okay. Thank you. And it's inspiring always listening to our scholarship recipients. Fantastic stuff. Today's symposium discusses the Zen and the art of the Industrial Development Agency. Our panelists will present the facts of how an IDA project is created, discuss the benefits, and bring clarity to some of the misconceptions that exist. Our moderator for the discussion is Dave Panetta. Dave is a director and member of our executive committee at REI. Dave is a senior management manager at Cushman & Wakefield with decades of experience in the representation of commercial developers and tenants throughout Long Island. Dave is also a member of the planning board for the town of Huntington. He will host our panelists that include Kay Kelly Murphy, the Deputy Executive Director of the Suffolk County IDA, Harry Coughlin, the CEO and Executive Director of the Nassau County IDA, Kyle Strober, Executive Director of ABLI, the Association for a Better Long Island, and David Chauvin, Executive Vice President at Creative Communications. As an aside, this webinar will also be live streamed and recorded on our newly created YouTube account, Real Estate Institute at Stony Brook University. Please subscribe, like, and share to promote this channel, because if we can achieve monetization, 100% of those resources will be made available as additional scholarship funds to give back to the students at Stony Brook University. So with that, I'd like to hand this off to Dave, and thank you all for being in attendance. I'm sure you'll find this to be of great interest to you.
Thank you, Pat. Good morning to everyone, and our sponsors and all of our viewers. We purposely came up with an interesting title, Zen in the Art of the IDA, and there's reason for that. You know, as long as I've been in real estate, which is about 30 years, you know, the IDA has always gotten, I think, unfair publicity. Part of it is, I think, a misunderstanding how things get handled. You know, a great example of that was the big tech company that we all know that was trying to bring 25,000 jobs into Long Island City. The politicians were saying, "Hey, we want that suitcase of $3 billion and let's hand it out to the poor," where in reality, there's no suitcase of cash. That company was going to pay $30 billion of taxes. There was a reduction to $27 billion. So by squashing the deal, we lost $27 billion to the community in taxes. So we're going to go through that, some other examples. And I think more importantly, we're going to go sort of get on a corrective course here so everybody understands what the function of the IDA is, what it does, how it's functioning. It's not, you know, it's not shifting tax to the residents. You know, it's bringing a broader tax base. So with that, our chairman, Pat, I guess, introduced everyone already. So why don't we, so we have Kelly Murphy, Deputy Executive Director for Suffolk County IDA, Harry Coughlin, CEO, Executive Director, Nassau County IDA, Kyle Strober, Executive Director of ABLI, who is today representing the interests and the viewpoints of the development community, and David Chauvin, who is Executive VP of Creative Communications, who's sort of like the conduit between, I think, the public, the media, and the IDA. So, so we've got a great panel here. Did we lose Kelly? Is Kelly here still?
Hey, Dave, Kelly's going to be joining us momentarily. Like many things in the economic development sphere, she wears many hats. So she's coming from an event with the county executive. So
Okay.
She'll be with us in minutes.
Okay, so actually we actually started a little bit early as well. Harry, you're on mute right now, but you and I spoke a little bit about the IDA, sort of like their starts here on Long Island, Nassau, Suffolk. Just could you talk a little bit about like when our Long Island stuff started and what the purpose was, and give us a little bit of history with that so we can share with everybody why there seemed to be a need to start these organizations.
Sure. Good morning, David. Great to be here with my friends and fellow panelists, David, Kyle, and Kelly. Just very quickly, I just want to say thank you to you, Patrick, and Maggie for including the Nassau IDA today. Really thrilled to be here. And just a quick note of congratulations to the 2 scholarship recipients. I think that's fantastic and wish them well in their scholastic and future professional endeavors. So yes, you and I had a conversation about when the IDA commenced. It is actually a state law that created IDAs. It was created in 1969. So I like to joke that a lot of great things happened in 1969. You had the lunar module landing, and the lunar module was obviously built here on Long Island at the Grumman facilities. The Mets, the Jets, the Knicks all won their respective championships, and IDAs were created. So I think they are all fantastic events. But we are a public benefit corporation formed under state law, and we are for the benefit of Nassau County, our respective county. There are actually 109 IDAs across the state, and believe it or not, there are 8 just on Long Island. There are 3 in Nassau County. So we partner up at times with the IDA in the city of Glen Cove, as well as the town of Hempstead, all working towards the goal of job creation, economic development, and prosperity for the residents and taxpayers of Nassau County.
So it was, 1969, I guess Grumman was still was still ripping and roaring back then, was sort of the writing on the wall that they were eventually going to be pulling off and not being Long Island's major employer? Was there any inkling of that? Of, you know, basically the largest employer here, non-governmental employer, I think, was Grumman for many years. So
I don't believe we could have predicted that back in 1969, and I can't recall the exact dates when that migration happened, but there was obviously a need for economic development organizations within New York State. And what it does is it gives the local municipalities the opportunity to form IDAs to provide tax incentives, and it's local tax incentives. What we try to do whenever we enter into a larger transaction or we get involved in a very exciting deal, particularly trying to attract someone to Nassau County or Long Island, we'll partner up with New York State Empire State Development. We'll partner up with our utility partners at PSE&G and National Grid, and we all together will work hard in partnership to try and create a comprehensive incentive package to bring those companies here or to retain them here.
right, Harry, could you just just so everybody understands how the benefit works, can you just talk about exactly what's happening there? I mean, I kind of went through quickly with the Long Island City scenario, but just let us understand exactly what happens. Like what is the benefit? How is it getting paid? Just talk about that quickly.
Sure. It's a largely misunderstood concept, hard to describe quickly, but I'll do my best. We, in the IDAs, I guess we have three tools in our toolbox, if you will. We can provide exemptions on sales and use tax. So if there is a large construction project, we can give a complete sales tax exemption on all the materials, equipment, fixtures as part of that project. Second, if there's financing or an acquisition of property, we can provide a partial exemption on mortgage recording tax. The more, I guess, complex and sometimes controversial element is the pilot program, which stands for payments in lieu of taxes. And I think, unfortunately, what people always hear when they hear pilot is they hear the in lieu of taxes component, and they assume that there are no taxes being paid. But it is payments in lieu of taxes. And the reason it is phrased in lieu of taxes is because IDAs, by creation, are a tax exempt entity. And when a company purchases a property, we actually take an ownership interest in it. Therefore, the property is still tax exempt, but they're going to create a schedule of, in a sense, real estate taxes that they are going to pay. And they're called payments in lieu of taxes because we can't call them taxes outright because they're not, but it functions exactly like real estate taxes. The payments that come in go direct to the county. The IDA never receives the funds, and they are allocated back out to the villages and the towns and the local municipalities in the exact same percentage as if they were straight tax payments.
So, David, this question is going to be directed to you.
Sure.
So it seems seems the IDA's got a bit of a PR problem, right? It's technical how it operates, right? It's a government agency. It needs to be transparent. So it's tough to put spin on something and say, hey, we're being totally forthright and truthful. But the complexity of this creates a lot of confusion. Is there a better way to present what's going on with the IDA when they're dealing with companies, they're giving incentives? I mean, like technically, you're not ever handing physically anybody money. So they're not saying, here's our tax base from our residents, here, take this money and please come here. So I think that's what the misconception is. And when you hear stuff like pilots, it's like, okay, well, what does pilot mean? You know,
Yeah.
it's payment in lieu of taxes, but you got pilot, IDA. It seems like there should be a better spin on this.
Yeah, Dave, foremost, like Harry started before, I just want to thank Stony Brook, yourself, the Institute for having me on today and being part of this panel. On a personal note, it's really special for me to be part of a program that's under the name of John Komanicki, somebody I had an incredible opportunity to work with, and it's wonderful to see his legacy continue based on, just his tireless advocacy for the region. And so I just wanted to acknowledge him because he was very special to me, and I was lucky enough to know him. In answer to your question, yeah, there's definitely a PR issue, a communications issue as a whole. I think because we're talking, as you put it, we're talking about a very ministerial function of government. We're talking about, what does IDA even stand for? And to your point, and with Harry, articulating it earlier, that payment portion of pilot gets lost. Moreover, in 9 out of 10 cases, the public is receiving more in tax benefit, even with a pilot, than they were previously, because we're looking at underutilized properties. We're looking at properties that in some cases might not even be on the tax roll. I think it's important to note, especially with Harry and his board, the work that they've done in getting, major development back up and running on Long Island. I think to try to tackle some of these large scale misconceptions, IDAs have broadened their mission. So beyond just working with businesses and developers to talk about a bottom line, Harry and Kelly and Tony in Suffolk County have really broadened their mission about bringing these projects to fruition in a number of ways. In some cases, working cohesively with other county departments, bringing on different studies and intellectual property that helps motivate the public in understanding things. I'm sure Kyle will touch on this, but Suffolk County in particular was instrumental in getting certain benchmark studies about school district impact, another common misconception for development on Long Island. And so I think, IDAs have looked to broaden the scope, one, because I think that their customer base, if you will, but also the public at large and so on, they need a much more holistic approach to economic development. And I think that Kelly and Harry in particular have really kind of met that challenge head on. But it's a block by block process, and it's not just the public. In some cases, we have to continue to influence, other stakeholders, community associations, influencers, and in some cases, even elected officials. IDA law and IDA process are ministerial and in some cases arcane. We've been part of discussions too, statewide, about even looking at the name IDA because the mission is so much broader now in terms of how to affect positive change for the region. And so does the word industrial, in and of itself just limit the scope or appreciation of the scope of what the agency can do? Kelly and her board just passed a project yesterday, which was a necessary and almost essential project for housing in the Huntington region. It doesn't necessarily qualify as that industrial term. At the same time, without the IDA's help, we wouldn't see massive growth in the nutraceutical and the pharmaceutical manufacturing sectors that Suffolk County has seen, or for Harry's sake, quantifying affordable housing in Nassau County to make sure that people have a genuine understanding of the need. So there is a problem. We're trying to hit it on multiple fronts, but back to your points originally, Dave, the ministerial nature of this is difficult. And again, it almost goes person by person, especially with the forces working against us.
I think maybe we should hire Matthew McConaughey and have him, one of those solemn or IDA. No, it's keep the jobs here agency.
Yeah. If anybody could get the mindset or the religious nature of economic development, that real spiritual moment, I think it's McConaughey.
Kelly, your mic is off, so unmute because I'm going to ask you a question. And thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
Good morning. So I want to, I just want to briefly understand, because I've done other symposia, on zoning and, where Euclidean zoning started back in the 50s. I want to understand, and people, our viewership wants to understand, where's the first Neanderthal IDA? What was the first one? What state started it? What's like the history beyond prior to Long Island? Do you have any idea on that?
I did. Frankly, for everyone, Dave and I were having this conversation, and while I've known some of the history behind IDAs, I dug a little deeper yesterday with some of my favorite attorney friends, Bob Ryan and, of course, Nick Terzulli. So it's kind of interesting to see. So 1969 is when the New York State Legislature passed a law which allowed cities and counties to create IDAs. It was Governor Nelson Rockefeller back then who was working along with government officials. And what they were doing was they were hoping to not only keep industry and manufacturing in the state, but to attract new business. And what was happening at the time was 40 other states already had the ability to issue tax-exempt debt. And New York, in order to be competitive, had to enter into that. So it was interesting. Bob Ryan sent me the original, I guess, what's called in legal terms, jacket. And it included all of the letters from all the different, municipalities and mayors and county executives. So it was really interesting to kind of go through the history behind it. But then I think what we're seeing now, and I guess I do want to add that the bill was an enabling act, which meant that it didn't provide for IDAs, but it rather enabled local legislatures to create IDAs at their will. The Suffolk County Ledge created the Suffolk IDA in 1975. So, a lot of what we see from the history is exactly what's happening today, right? I mean, we're still trying to fight off Pennsylvania and surrounding states, and specifically in the South, from grabbing our manufacturing firms. And I'm sure Harry will agree, 95% of what we do is retention. We would love it to be more in the attraction, but it's very difficult with the high cost of doing business and the lengthy process in which to get through. So for us, we do anything and everything we can to help our businesses grow and expand. And we do see, Dave, a lot of what we're successful with are headquarters. While we may lose some of the manufacturing to Pennsylvania and to the Carolinas, because of the great quality of life and how entrenched our CEOs and principals become in Long Island, we're able to hold on to them. But yeah, that's just a little bit of the history, but I do want to go through, and Kyle has done this before, so I don't know if he did it yet this morning, but the Enabling Act reads that according to the statute, the purpose of IDAs is to promote, develop, encourage, and assist in acquiring, constructing, maintaining, or equipping certain facilities, thereby advancing the job opportunities, health, general prosperity, and the economic welfare of the people of New York.
Okay. Just to sort of give our viewership here a different focal point. We heard, last year about tariffs, and, tariffs in a vacuum, you could say, well, tariffs raise prices of things, not necessarily a good thing. But if in this context, it was China that had tariffs against US products, and US didn't really have the corresponding tariff. So our products were more expensive going out, and Chinese products were more expensive coming in. So when the United States was doing the tariffs, we, hold on, my polling question just popped up. When we started adding the tariffs, you have to do it to compete. So here, the symbiosis is sort of like that same thing with Pennsylvania and New Jersey. if they didn't have IDAs, nobody else had IDAs, Long Island doesn't need to have IDAs necessarily. So we're competing with other regions that are looking for their retention and for their attraction of businesses. And, so where it's a needed thing. Kyle.
Yes.
Your viewpoint here is from the development side, even though you had a stint on the political forum before coming in over here. Talk a little bit about the experiences and some of the frustration and with the development community. Like I know right now, real estate, it's not a stagnant thing. So retail is been in the dumper before COVID, right? You have a lot of vacant big boxes. So traditionally, a retail center wasn't something that you would target. But now, in order to get those to become a productive part of producing taxes, producing jobs, and whatever, residential traditionally wasn't, but we've got companies leaving because they can't get young people living here. So multifamily has been something else that's been included. So talk a little bit, maybe start from the 30,000 foot.
Sure. So first off, I want to say that it was completely unfair that nobody gave me the memo not to wear a tie and a jacket to this educational event. I was hoping Kelly would show up with a tie and I'd feel somewhat comfortable,
Sorry.
but she didn't even come through for me. So I feel out of place, but that's okay. I get the joke and I have to acknowledge it. The second thing I want to say is Harry's got a fantastic backdrop. I mean, the beautiful city of Long Beach Boardwalk, my hometown. Harry, good job supporting the city by the sea. They need as much support as possible these days. But in terms of IDAs, look, ABLI is one of the fiercest advocates for IDAs. We view them as a necessary tool to make Long Island economically viable. And I think that a takeaway, what Kelly did was really important, is people who are using this to learn about IDAs, they need to hear the actual definition of the IDA, which she provided. But if you want a little context, I say this, we live in a high tax, high cost region. We live in a region where there's a suffocating zoning requirements. And we also live in a region that desperately needs multifamily housing. And all that you can't possibly have projects come to fruition unless you have the IDA. The IDA is a tool that offsets some of the burdens that are here on Long Island that aren't in other places of the country. Nassau County is a mature county. We have nowhere to go but up. In Texas, there's plenty of land. So they can constantly be growing and growing, and they have lower taxes, lower energy costs, and they can provide more incentives for economically viable projects. And what the IDA does is offsets incentives that are going in other parts of the country, because right now, financial institutions that are lending are global. They don't just look in the New York region. They don't just look across America. They look across the world. And for us to compete, particularly across the United States, is we need the incentives that the IDA provides to bring that financing to Long Island and to keep the jobs or to bring new jobs here in the region. And I think that's really the most important thing I view as the IDA. It's a tool that puts us on a level playing field in some regards. I mean, Harry and Kelly can go into it in a little more detail. Sometimes they don't have enough tools to compete to areas like Florida and Texas and South Carolina. It's just, they give away free land, no taxes. I mean, how do you compete with that? Why we compete is because, one, we're still the global capital of the world. So people want to be in proximity to New York City. We're really connected worldwide because of our airports. And also Long Island is a beautiful place to live. We have good schools, we have nice beaches, we have good parks. It's a desirable place that companies look to bring their employees to. So, I mean, that's kind of like my overall view of IDAs from not a technical standpoint like Kelly gave, but more of like a practical standpoint of what you should be viewing them as and how it relates to our economy.
Yeah, the big danger we come in at, that I see with corporations, just like you're saying, it's like, it's beautiful to live here. We're next to the city, we're by the beach. Is when the Long Island companies, we've been very good at developing something from nothing, growing these companies into these huge companies. And where Long Island gets at risk is when they get purchased by a global company. and they get pulled out of Long Island because they're like, well, look, we're sitting here in Seattle. We don't care that the beaches are beautiful there or you got great airports. But you talk about Texas. Texas is on a boom right now. And just to talk about cost, just on energy costs, I was having a discussion with a friend of mine that was so pro Tesla, the car. So I did a calculation and I said, he's from Texas. So I said, in Texas, because of the price of kilowatt hour, the Tesla, you get an equivalent of 100 miles a gallon, right? Cost-wise. Here on Long Island, because of the cost of energy, it gets an equivalent of 50 miles per gallon. So there's cars you could buy that are gas cars that get 50 miles a gallon. But it shows you the stark contrast with costs, not only taxes. I have a friend that's building a house. His taxes are going to be $60,000 a year. So I said to him, you should have a government employee sitting at your mailbox for 60 grand a year. You should have your own government employee. Like, why are we so expensive? Why are we so expensive here? So I'm going to make one example. So here's my iPhone. Oh, I guess you can't see it because of my background. Here's my iPhone. So there's a thing called the multiplier effect. And I just want to talk about that real quick. If you go on to New York State, their website for, I think it's ocs.state.nyu.us. For every job that Apple has, and you're talking about in Texas, so they have a plant in Austin. For every job that they have physically inside of their plant, there's 7 jobs in the community making the buttons, the cases, the chips, the software. And that's kind of like what we had with Grumman. So there's like a multiplier of like 7 to 1. Grumman, I think maybe was 5.7 jobs. The medical industry, which we're all like, well, there's doctors, they make a lot of money, there's nurses. The job multiplier is 1.4, right? So 5.7 versus 1.4. That's a big difference. And we do need to keep our technology companies, the pharmaceutical companies, because not only are we keeping those direct jobs, but we're keeping a multiple of other jobs that are supporting those companies. So the multiplier effect has always been, and it continues to be, a big thing. So with that, I just want to talk about, we're not just industrial anymore. Could you guys just talk about, so there's been a shift in the real estate world. Long Island has got the lowest industrial vacancy rate, I think, ever, no matter what point you go back. We're below 2% vacancy with buildings that have 30-foot and higher ceilings. So even with IDA, there wasn't people building industrial buildings. Only recently has that happened since we've sort of hit a crash. But talk a little bit about the IDA, where now it's morphing into doing different things, other things that are supporting. So whoever wants to start with that, please do.
So I'll jump in and talk about the obvious, the multifamily housing, which David referenced earlier. So often the battle cry against multifamily is that it doesn't create enough jobs, and that, the IDA's mission is job creation and private capital investment, which is all true. But the reality is almost every single one of our client companies tells us that they have difficulty hiring highly skilled workforce, recruiting highly skilled workforce from out of state. And largely it's because of the lack of housing choices. We all know that the rental market on Long Island is 20%, which compared to neighboring counties at 35%, it just isn't even close. And while we've made huge strides, we used to only talk about Patchogue, right, in terms of downtown multifamily, and now there's a dozen or more, but it still just does not meet the need. So as responsible economic developers, we're responding to what our companies are telling us. If we can't help our clients staff and keep employees, then we can't keep them on Long Island. We can't attract them to Long Island. Multifamily housing responds to that need. Multifamily housing is, I would argue, one of the most important economic imperatives that we face right now. And I think all the IDAs are responding to that, and in a responsible way. As the Suffolk IDA, we're not one town or one city. So we work within a variety of towns. So we don't have an affordable housing policy, and we can't, quite frankly. But we do strongly urge our board members to enforce at minimum a 10% workforce according to the state, and beyond that. The Blue and Gold Renaissance, part of Renaissance in the Huntington Station revitalization that was approved for a preliminary resolution yesterday for us, has below market rate workforce housing. So generally it would fall in the 1,600 range. There's two or three apartments at 1,200. It's a small building. It's 16 units.
Yep.
But I just, more and more we're hearing people that are objecting to involvement by IDAs in multifamily. And I just think, as I say, it's an economic development imperative.
Yeah, and let me add that from the developer standpoint, and Kelly's spot on. I mean, we need multifamily housing. We need town centers, places where people can work, live, and play. That's where that's where the next generation is moving towards, and where they find desirable in communities. Now, from a developer's perspective, is what Kelly said is, you have virtually nowhere on Long Island besides maybe the city of Glen Cove and Long Beach where there's multifamily zoning. So in any project that you embark on, you need to get zoning changed. And that brings out NIMBYism, that brings a long, drawn out public hearing process. And it boils down to, it takes a lot of time. And then on top of that, there's hundreds of other reasons why these projects can get stopped. And when banks look at financing these projects, they say, well, what's the bottom line? How long is it going to take? And what's going to be the return? And without the IDA coming in and encouraging this necessary need on Long Island to attract a young, vibrant workforce, the financial institutions will say no. Said, we're going to park our money in another state or another region because it just takes too long and there's not enough of a return on this investment. People think developers are super rich and finance everything by themselves. Well, that's rarely the case. Developers work on spec, and they have financial partners who pay the majority of the cost of the project, and they have people that they need to meet when it comes to fruition to repay the money.
Yeah.
To Kyle's point too about the development process, I think where both Suffolk and Nassau have really started to play a key role is continuing to educate communities about these burdens, and also about helping them channel their energies in a productive way. Whether it's downtown studies, or helping to take a project like the Super Block project in Long Beach and the work that Harry and his team did, shepherding along some of these things, or being an active participant has helped that process forward. I know Kelly, through work with consultants, has been very influential in helping to shape downtowns and looking at small and big options. I mean, Kelly, you did the fill-in zoning with Amityville. I know there's been work in Lindenhurst. By the way, there's been work, IDA work in the Hop Hog Industrial Park, which is the Innovation Park, which is the second largest industrial park in the country next to Silicon Valley. Sometimes people don't always realize, these massive economic resources and what they ultimately mean. Working with school districts. I know this has been an issue for Kyle as far as school district impact on multifamily. I referenced the Patchogue study before. The net positive to the Patchogue School District based on Tritech and other developments in downtown Patchogue has been in the millions. But those studies are necessary to convince people in other communities that these projects are the right way to go. I think to some extent, and we still have a hangover from Grumman. I remember my father coming home with a Grumman turkey, and he didn't even work for Grumman. So Grumman was everywhere. I mean, we're now dealing with the industrial contamination issue in Bethpage, which is a subject for another day, but massively concerning. Still, the loss of those manufacturing jobs and that multiplier effect that you were talking about, is overwhelming. And I think to some extent when it happened, I don't know that we all completely appreciated it and what it would mean in terms of the region having to transform itself. So advocacy groups like Kyle's, SIBS is another great organization talking about the need for industrial, working with the IDAs, have to lead with elected officials this regional conversation.
Right. One thing I know with the multifamily, we didn't even talk about 55 and over. My parents, my dad's 90, my mom's 85, still married, still together. My dad's still driving his car too.
Mazel tov.
But they would have lived out their lives in their single family home until they got exposed from some friends to, a 55 and over community that had other people that were, closer to their age. Incidentally, nobody in a 55 and over community is anywhere near 55. They're all more like that 80 or 90. But so they're there. There's a clubhouse, there's a pool, there's comedy nights on Tuesdays, there's this. They're having a much better quality of life where they're living now than they were living more isolated in their home. And they weren't aware of this option. We moved my wife's parents into one recently. And I remember, look, human nature hasn't changed. I got married 27 years ago, and we rented part of a house on Elm Street in Huntington Village. But would I have rather been in a brand new Avalon with a clubhouse pool, other people our age? Yes, absolutely, but it didn't exist. So there is a change that we're seeing here. As much as people think that there's been so many apartments built, we still need about 100,000 of them to start bringing the pricing down to, we keep saying affordable. We're upside down in supply demand. So nothing's affordable if there's a restriction on supply. So the more that we can, produce, and we're seeing the land use authorities are embracing it, but it's difficult. Even recently dealing with some applications, there's an education to everybody on, there's all these boards, zoning boards, planning boards, architectural boards, town boards, then at the county level. But here's one thing that Long Island does have, though, that North Carolina and some of these other areas, and who told me this was Rob Kent from TriTech, and he said, we have actual real downtowns. They're not like fake downtowns that we're making it and trying to surround it with stuff to say, hey, this is, anywhere USA, it's a downtown, walkable environment. Patchogue, I think one of the reasons why it's been so successful is everything that it has, right? It's got a train station, it's on the water. There's a huge history. That was sort of like the gateway into, central and eastern Suffolk County for like many, many years, like decades. So there's a lot going on here, and we do appreciate everyone here, and Kyle, your side, David, thank you, for helping, Harry and Kelly. We're not finishing up here, but it's all of your sticking to this and saying, how can we do this better? The world is changing. It's more global. There's more eyes on this. So let's touch the whole reason why we're even having this. And it's the media, the public, the politicians, their view on the IDA and how they communicate. So I did see one article from Newsday, so I'm not picking on Newsday, that led with something that I thought was fantastic. And it said that there was X amount of private investment for an IDA benefit of X amount of dollars. And the ratio between the IDA benefit, it was like a 50-time ratio of what the public what the private investment was into a community versus the incentive. That to me was an appropriate headline. I saw it once. I called Newsday, thanked them for doing that. How do we get more of that where, and I think, Kelly, I was telling you, I was in Suffolk Community College. It was the HIA forum, and it was actually the Suffolk County IDA had the thing. We gave $100 million the past year in IDA incentives, and I said that was a horrible banner. And the reason being is the corresponding number was like $9.8 billion of private investment for $120 million of incentive. Again, that's huge. That's a huge ratio. So some of the fault is our own, right? But how do we deal? Like, how are you guys talking, Harry and Kelly, and I guess David? How are you talking about having a better interface? You know, again, one of it might be the Matt McConaughey things, changing the IDA name. But what are we doing? What are we doing going forward so this isn't such like we got to whisper every time there's an IDA incentive given?
We can't be afraid to tell the story. I mean, plain and simple. Sometimes you have to lead with the objections. And the one, I think, overarching challenge, and maybe people don't understand, is that the economic development industry, if you will, particularly at our levels, at the municipal levels, is highly, highly competitive. I can tell you that we have governors from other states coming here to visit. Kelly talked about HQs, headquarters. They are coming here, they're visiting our largest employers, and they're saying, hey, come down here. As Kyle said, the land is free, taxes are low, utilities, don't worry about the utilities. Okay, yes, it's a high cost to operate here. Taxes are high, construction is high cost. You can go down there, you can go to the former fields in Texas and you can get free land, but will you be near an international airport? Will you even be near a regional airport? Here, we're near to 3+. Will you be next to the greatest capital market in the world? So we need to get the objections on the table right away when we're trying to recruit somebody in and we're speaking to a company. And then you got to lead with your value proposition and start laying out all of the reasons why it's worth the investment. Just like real estate, it's location, location, location. And with all the intangibles and all the benefit we had to offer, it comes with a higher cost. It's just a simple equation. And our other side is you have to look at different audiences. You have those that you're trying to attract. And as Kelly said, there's two components. There's the outbound marketing where you're trying to attract companies in. There's also sort of inbound where you're speaking to your more local folks. You're speaking to your local companies about retention and expansion, but you're also speaking to the taxpayers. And you want them to understand and dispel some of these misconceptions that we're talking about, that we're really creating value here. It's not tax breaks, it's tax creation. And I think once you get into the nuts and bolts of how pilot programs work, if somebody's willing to take the time and step back and be educated, and it took me a while, I'm only in this job for 2 years. All of my prior experience was in the private sector. It took me a little bit of time to understand them. They're not the easiest program to fully understand, but we just have to be out there constantly telling the story. We just can't be afraid to tell the story, and we can't be afraid to put the objections on the table.
Yep. If I could, Harry, just to follow up on that, some of the points that you're talking about, I think are best articulated with the work that you and your team did in Long Beach, because even in the midst of a pandemic, you guys really did go block by block. There were a lot of commitments directly made by the IDA to the community. And, I think Kyle can speak to this. The City by the Sea has a very active community, so they know how to mobilize, they know how to talk. And this is a historic piece of property within the fabric of Long Beach, right, Harry? I mean, this is not, no matter what it is, it's not an easy sell.
Yeah, but let me jump in here real quick to David's point. Is in the super block case, and this is what quote unquote grinds ABLI's gears, is that the daily newspaper of record here in Long Island wrote an editorial that this project would shift the tax burden onto the local community. That was factually incorrect. And we struck back with an op-ed right away. And to their credit, they printed it. But the normal misnomer is that when a project receives a pilot, they pay less in taxes than they previously had. And I would like Harry and Kelly, for the record, for the educational portion of this program, to explain, do they pay less in taxes under a pilot?
So I want to just respond also. In that editorial, they cited the Huntington Hotel, which is a blighted site that's been sitting there for 10 years. You have George Tunis, coming into town saying, listen, I'm going to invest millions of dollars to restore it to its original facade and build a boutique hotel. That one was 600, the comparison was the current taxes over the life of the pilot, if it stayed as is, was $685,000. As a result of the improvements and the hotel being on it, it's going to be $2.5 million. And to your point, I think was something that we worked really hard on, and with David's firm, when I started working with Zimmerman Edelson and Suffolk IDA, I said, every single project, we need to prepare a press release. They're like, no, James writes his own, and people, blah, blah. I said, no, he doesn't have to carry it. I'm fine with that, but we need to present the facts, present the information, and do it for every single project. And we need to stress that the average pilot, the average 485B garden variety pilot, is the applicant is paying 75%, and the abatement of the benefit is 25%. So I said, somehow we need to weave that into the story, into the press releases. And, it's year after year, we continue to do that. James does a fabulous job covering our clients and being as realistic and factual as anybody out there. And I think it really has changed, because a lot of the clients that come to us, the new clients, say they heard about us by reading about another client in Newsday. So, there's different sides of Newsday, right? There's, the coverage. And again, I think Harry and I are fortunate that we have James Medor, who does cover us, but some of the beat reporters really don't understand the concept of what we do. So getting out there and educating the public and doing it not only through press releases, but through our website, through panels like this, through thought leadership pieces. I know Harry's really great at including pieces in Innovate Long Island. And again, just to circle back, luckily for us, all those press releases we've been doing, while James does his own, Long Island Business News and many of the blogs will commonly pick up what it is that we're putting out there, so that we get to help educate the public as to the economic benefits that we offer.
And I'd just like to point out as well, we're all Nassau residents. We're about a 7-member team at the IDA. We're supported by a fantastic, very supportive 7-member board. We're all Nassau County residents. We're not going to do a deal that is bad for Nassau County, bad for a school district. Will someone object? Yes, there's always going to be some objections to some aspect of a project. But just quickly on the Superblock project, I have to commend the city of Long Beach. Great partners in just working through, but we all have the lanes in which we operate. And people will come, residents will come, and rightly so. They may want something different. They may disagree with some aspects of the project, but when we were talking earlier about zoning and regulations, well, it's the municipality, whether it's the village or the town, that provides the zoning approvals and the permits. That's not our lane. Another issue that's come up recently is environmental with Amazon distribution center in Syosset. That's the state, that's the DEC. So when people come to object to these aspects that are hearing, that's not our lane. We operate in the lane of the financial incentives. There are so many aspects to these projects that they are complex, but we all have the lanes in which we operate. And, fortunately, when you get an engaged community and an engaged city council or board of trustees, you can do great things, as we've seen in Long Beach and as we saw in the town of Oyster Bay with Amazon.
You know, I in previous years, Nassau County and Suffolk County didn't really work together like you guys are working together now. So it's good to see that. I remember an example where I had a company that was interested in going to Jersey, and we called, you know, the New Jersey Economic Development Office, and they said, okay, meet us at Teterboro Airport. And so I met there with the president of the company and the CEO and CFO. And not only did they do, you know, accept us, take us up, and they were showing us the commercial areas, but they did research on the presidents and the other top executives on their spouse, whether they were golfers or boaters or whatever. And they flew us over the golf clubs, flew us over the, you know, the yacht clubs, the residential areas. They flew us, and obviously over the commercial, and showed the corridors and everything else. You know, I was always very impressed back in the Loco days where we started with the Long Island Partnership. So I was part of the Long Island Partnership back then, and then it got resurrected. You know, so I guess that was probably like around in the 90s, where the real estate market really dumped. And then the LIA took it over. I forgot what the years were, but it was another down market. And I was on that board representing SIBS. So we were the first non-governmental, non-utility board member. And it was sort of nice when a company came in from the outside, you sat down with Suffolk County IDA, Nassau County IDA, the Department of Health, you know, zoning, sewer, everything that you would need to, you know, touch. And it showed Long Island in a very cohesive, sort of friendly environment. Then the real estate market recovered, and then that sort of dissolved again. So are we doing any structural changes that Long Island is working together collectively with, you know, you're saying there's 8 IDAs here. Is there an effort to do that, to sort of co-market and work that way together, or plans or anything about that?
Yeah, I'm going to let Harry tee this up because there's a really loud landscaper outside of my house. So, and I'll jump in the end.
The benefits of remote work, or the challenges, I should say. Like I said earlier, I've been in this industry for 2 years. I've worked with the IDA for 2 years, but I've lived here for 15. I've learned more about Nassau County in the last 2 years than I did in the 15 years living here. One of the key learnings is that the economic development community here on Long Island is a great community, is extremely collaborative. People are very passionate about making sure that we continue to grow the economic prosperity and the tax base of Long Island as a region. I have found nothing but open doors since I've been here. When I first met with the Suffolk IDA, you know, Tony Catapano there, John McNally, formerly there, Kelly, nothing but giving me direction on resources and folks to contact, and getting to know people like Kyle and now David. It's a fantastic community. And I think the one thing that points to our level of collaboration is we have been working with Discover Long Island, all 8 of the IDAs, and we created created is a tough word to use because it's not a formal organization, but we created a brand of the Long Island's Economic Development Collective. And we are all working together with Discover to just get the message out outside the borders of New York State about all the great benefits what the Long Island region has to offer. And it's important that we think like that, because if a company is headquartered in Nassau, no doubt some of those employees are going to live in Suffolk. And all of them at one point or another are going to visit Suffolk for entertainment, for the beaches, et cetera. And it works in the opposite if a company's headquartered in Suffolk. So, you know, what do they say? A rising tide lifts all boats. And I think the collaboration is critical to the success of economic development in this region.
And I'll just add on that. I think what Harry said is absolutely right. They've created this partnership with Discover Long Island, which just demonstrates that, quite frankly, they're working together to benefit the region. There are some parts of the region where there are issues of cannibalizing each other, but that doesn't happen in Long Island. You know, if a company is looking for a deal and it's in one jurisdiction, another Long Island IDA doesn't try to incentivize them to come across a Nassau-Suffolk border or an Islip Babylon town border. Everybody is always in tune with what everyone else is doing. And quite frankly, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I've been on some of this. You guys bounce each other ideas off each other and exchange information on terms of packages, so you aren't, you know, undercutting each other to try to woo business within the region.
Right. I'm going to jump in. Apparently, well, it is loud here. Sorry. I'm in my multifamily housing apartment, by the way. They're just, I seem to be talking about history this morning. So Kevin Law from LIA put together all of the IDAs generally like once a year. And this started many years ago. And it was generally, they only met to address a need or legislation that was being proposed that was adversarial to IDAs. And as a result of that, we started to organize the 8 IDAs because we would meet at conferences and because we do get along and because we did talk. And we met quarterly to discuss best practices and marketing ideas. And frankly, McNally and I were working for a long time to try and convince the other IDAs in Suffolk to band together from a marketing perspective, because we were investing a tremendous amount of money in marketing. And as the Suffolk IDA, we were getting phone calls for all of the other, you know, all over the island, which was fine. I mean, we want, you know, any company to come to Suffolk, but we found that, you know, they would call me that I have to refer you to Brookhaven or to Islip or to Riverhead or to Babylon. So, and, you know, budgets had to be considered and very different boards in Suffolk at the other IDAs. But in the end of the day, we were very fortunate that National Grid, Lyle Sklar, had told us about an economic development grant that we would be eligible for. And that's how we formed this Long Island Economic Development Collective. And we did it as a pilot. And it was a $50,000 grant with a 50 match. And all of us chipped in to do it. And we all hoped that that would be the seed or the beginning of a collaborative effort, because what we're about is attracting people to the region. You know, we're not selling IDA financial benefits, right? We're marketing the region. This is, we want to create a greater workforce and development industry here. So that's a little bit about how it got started, and it's again been tremendously successful working with Discover Long Island. Kristen Jarnigan is just amazing in what she's done to kind of present Long Island the way that she has, and it's a natural component for us to be a part of it. And just lastly, as a result of the work that we did, Kristen reached out to site selectors who has never ever written about us as a region or considered advocating for their clients to even consider Long Island for the many reasons that we've talked about this morning. And so in the last September issue, they came out and they did a whole Long Island intelligence report. Most of us advertised in that section. It was a really great resource. I know it's available on our website. I'm sure it's on Harry's as well. But it's just a great way to, again, collaborate together and market and advocate for our region.
That's great. And I just want to say also that both Suffolk and Nassau IDAs are very available and willing to spend time with, you know, people like myself that call when we're trying to make something work. I sold a piece of development land in Hicksville a few years ago, and it turned out to be the first speculative industrial building built in like 15 years. And David Chauvin, do you want to talk about that a little bit? I think you and I spoke about that.
Yeah, I think, to kind of frame this, I think where Kelly and Harry sit, along with the other IDAs, is really on the forefront of what's going on, working with the broker community, the developers, governments. Working with them, I've gotten to see firsthand how things are starting to shift. And sometimes I think as a region, or specifically amongst the decision maker class, there are some ideas of what we think are constants. But thanks to the work of Kelly and Harry, we're starting to look at things a little bit differently. We're starting to say, wait a minute, maybe we don't have the workforce that we think we do for certain sectors that are growing. Maybe we need to reevaluate the impacts that developments are having, positive or negative, within certain regions. And more importantly, now to your point, Dave, looking at the actual mix of development and the needs of this ever-changing and in this case rapidly changing economy. So we're seeing an absolute need for industrial and high-end warehouse that's happening at the moment. And Harry recently published a piece for Innovate, talking about how to meet some of these needs, an IDA like Nassau, and we've seen it in Suffolk too, has had to take risks or had to take on and look at projects differently to incentivize them for future growth. But I think, given the work that they're doing, Kelly and Harry are able to see these market trends emerging. So in the case of Suffolk and Kelly, I know this is a really point of pride for you and what you and Tony have done, recognizing the growth in certain sectors like the pharmaceutical and nutraceutical sector, and what we can do to either assist or simply get out of the way. For Harry, you've challenged us in working with you to really take a look at, reimagining, because you don't really have that land, that Kyle wants in Texas, that you really, Kyle, I love your time, man. I'm just saying.
I want to go to Texas. I want the land in Texas.
Yeah, I'll give you the land in Texas. You give me the tie. Like, I feel bad. But I think it's, looking at the need now for, warehouse and industrial space. And, this project in Hicksville in particular was a little bit of a risk in that it hadn't really been done before from an IDA standpoint, but the Nassau IDA saw the potential there. And so when we talk about reductions or pilots, one of the message points that we're really starting to test and build out there is the investment that IDAs are making in these companies and the return on that investment. So to Dave, your earlier point about the banner, it's not about what we gave away. It's ultimately about, the $9 billion in economic activity that we grew. Harry, I don't know if you want to go into details about that project in particular, but again, we need industrial. SIBS in particular, I know, has been very outspoken on this. As I know, Kyle has. I mean, Kyle, when are you not outspoken? But again, Harry, do you want to go into the details there?
Well, I appreciate that you look at it from the aspect of the Nassau County IDA and our board took a risk. I don't think that it measures up in comparison to the risk that a developer is taking, and their lending institutions or their financial backers and their financial partners are taking. This is all, for them, it's an equation of return on investment. So when you look at making an investment here, you're going to weigh it against making it elsewhere. And you can make an investment in another state or municipality, and you can be pretty well sure of a certain return on investment. How do you make that as attractive here? And one of the ways is through the pilot program. All it simply does is level set property taxes for a certain period of time, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. That gives cost certainty in their pro forma analysis to develop the return on investment. The more variability you can take out of their analysis, the better. And you don't want to make an investment somewhere where 2 years from now, you're going to see a property tax increase exponential to the investment, and now you're underwater on the project. All we provide at the end of the day is cost certainty on the investment analysis. So yes, the board took a risk. They did something they don't usually do. They approved a speculative project. But now we have the Worth Group and Walmart there, and we get that call all the time. I'm looking for 100,000, 150,000, 200,000 square feet of warehouse distribution space, 40-foot high ceilings, 20 loading bays. It doesn't exist. So the developers here have to continue to take that risk to try and find the space, make the investment, tear down the old, antiquated industrial spaces and build new. So they are simply taking a much greater risk than we took. We just looked at it from a perspective of, do we trust this developer? Do we like what they're saying? Do we believe in what they're saying? And then it turned out the way it was supposed to turn out in this instance.
Yeah, and that was, when I started marketing that, it was a refuse recycling, piece of land. There were a couple of small structures on it. And I was saying before, vacancy rate for high cube warehouses like less than 2%, right? And no one's built anything in the past 15 years. So if this is an example of a need for IDA assistance, right? I don't know what is. It's a phenomenal building. It's sort of was a turning point for the type of industrial product that we have here on the island. And, now we're sort of, again, we're heading into another area where, everybody hears last mile. Last mile is not a new invention again. 246 years ago was the beginning of our U.S. Postal Service. So the last mile that we've all been living with is our local post office. So they've been here forever, for hundreds of years. Now we have other retailers, companies are coming up and trying to put together infrastructure for their own last mile. But Harry, when I was talking to you, you made a great point to me with why give some of these last mile guys, it's last mile. They can't do last mile from New Jersey. So why don't you just talk a little bit about, talk a little bit about that on why that stuff qualifies and why it should qualify.
Sure. And you're referencing the Amazon distribution center that will be constructed in Syosset on the old Cerro Wire location. It's gotten a lot of attention, as it should. One of the critical things, and I'll come back to this very quickly, is there is what we call the but-for test. And when you're looking at an investment, let's use Amazon as that example, the way you have to look at it is, but for our assistance, the investment would not be made. That company would not relocate here. They would not spend 10 or hundreds of millions of dollars to take that risk and build a new facility here. So that's the critical component, is but for our help, they would not make the investment. In this instance, with Amazon, there's been some pushback on the need for a distribution facility here on the island. Now, obviously, Amazon operates here on the island. We're all getting our Amazon packages, so we're getting them today. Why do we need another distribution facility? It's because the need for that instant gratification is growing exponentially, and they want to, as a company, be better able to serve the Long Island region customers. They have options. When you're looking at, I came out of the private sector where you're dealing with capital committees, a board of directors, and every year a company will set a finite amount for capital investment. And they'll look at it either globally, they'll look at it nationally. In this instance, if there's a regional real estate director at Amazon, he's looking at his region, he's looking at opportunities to improve the operations of the company. And he may go to his capital committee and say, here's a project, $72 million. I think it will generate this ROI, and I think this is why we should build it. He's up against his colleague saying, I can do the same thing in Texas for 25 million. Why do you want to invest there? And you've got to sort of weigh all those aspects of the return on investment, the intangibles of it. But in this instance, people have said, well, we're already getting our packages. Why do we need another facility? And it's quite frankly because Amazon has other options. There are other things they can do with that investment. They can put it elsewhere, and then we don't get the construction jobs and we don't get the distribution jobs that come after the fact. And that property that's been vacant for 35 years and has gone through a lot of different iterations could remain vacant for another 35 years.
Yeah, Harry,
and the other thing
that's
is
a good point, Harry. That I'm glad you touched upon that. The Zero Wire property has been a lost tax revenue for decades at this point. We went through the Taub Mall proposal, that sunk. The Syosset Park proposal, that sunk. How long are we going to lose out on potential tax revenue dollars that reduce the burden for the Syosset school taxpayers as well as Nassau residents? There comes a point where you need to develop the site, get it on the books, and start generating income for the county.
Right. You're never going to have the perfect solution that's going to please everybody. There's no nirvana in all this. The last thing I just want to say is Amazon has options. They can continue to use third-party delivery providers. You said UPS, USPS, FedEx, but they may not be able to serve the region as well as they could if they did it themselves.
Right.
Right.
Go ahead, Kelly.
Dave, I just wanted to bring up, I think we really need to mention the Harts Mountain project as well.
Yeah.
Because it's a really significant project. That's the old Newsday site. It's a 53-acre site in Melville. And that went out for an RFP. And almost every respondent reached out to us to include potential benefits as part of their pro forma in response to the RFP. At the end of the day, Harts Mountain was successful. They are razzing the building that's on site. And think about it, if it was a very old antiquated building, I don't know we ever would have gotten somebody to move into that building or be able to subdivide it. So thankfully they came in, they're razzing the building, and they're building 2 industrial spaces, which will equal close to 1 million square feet. And that's all on spec, as you know. And it's gone through a very long process, not only the RFP, but, community outreach and permitting and, very, very long road, but it's, really significant project for Suffolk County in terms of building new industrial space. And just recently went through a groundbreaking. So just wanted to bring that one up as well.
And I also want to add, Kelly, on that project, Harts Mountain were very good actors in the sense that they worked with the community to the point that they are putting in a new traffic light to divert a lot of the traffic away from the residents that are along the western border of the property, correct?
Right. Yes.
So, I mean, it's a testament to the IDA, but also the Suffolk County County Exec, Steve Ballone. I mean, here's an opportunity in a pandemic to onboard 800 jobs in Suffolk County. I mean, that's unheard of, particularly in the middle of COVID. And then here's an example of them getting it done. And it wouldn't be possible but for the IDA.
Exactly.
Harry, we're talking about the Zero Wire piece. So that same company, did not get incentives for the Long Island City where they were bringing 25,000 jobs. So they didn't come. So there's an example where there was a need that we weren't able to respond to for, a lot of different reasons, political reasons. But now we lost that construction. There's 2 years of construction, temporary construction jobs, design and engineers, architects, and then the permanent employment of another 25,000 jobs of high paying positions are not here. So, we do need that. But here's a scary thing. And Kyle, I want your response to this. So who we sold the Hicksville piece to, Lincoln Equities company out of Jersey, right? Not local. Harts Mountain, company out of Jersey, not local. We're getting close to closing on the EPCAL deal. Company out of Canada. The developers here feel sort of beat up. They don't want to get involved in another long drawn out zoning, long drawn out IDA, having their names dragged through in the papers and whatnot. So I'm seeing them sort of sidelining themselves as we're seeing outside developers coming in. I mean, is this a trend? Have you seen this at all, or?
Well, I think one, many of the developers on Long Island are still actively developing. They're all busy, especially now. And the fact that people from other parts of the region or even further out are coming to Long Island shows that they believe that there's worthwhile investments in our region. And that's a good thing. You know, we want to be attracting more investment. And when they see things and opportunities, and they know that there are institutions like the IDAs and New York State Economic Regional Development Council that are willing to support your investment in the region, that should all be encouraging for our economic outlook, that there are continuing investment here. When it comes to, I forgot what the second part of the question is, but my folks are busy. I mean, they're frustrated at times. There's no doubt about that. But they are finding economically feasible opportunities and moving forward with it. I mean, Harry and Kelly can attest to this. Their dockets are busy. Every public meeting they have multiple cases, multiple hearings on the agenda, and multiple approvals are happening every month. So, you know, I do have a positive outlook here on Long Island. Some people are more skittish, but I just think that the geographic location, the entities that we have, the proximity to New York City, make the region very viable and very desirable for companies.
So Kyle, you mentioned just sort of, again, talking more about the expanding the IDA and what they're touching and what they're doing. You mentioned to me about the Riverhead Aquarium, you know, that they're coming back out and need additional incentives. And you made a couple of good correlations. Could you?
Yeah, so for everybody listening and participating in this educational program, me and David had a conversation before to talk about topics. And one of the interesting things I told him, which I think is important for people to understand, there was a recent article in our local daily newspaper, anybody reads knows what I'm talking about IDAs giving additional tax breaks to entities where they already received a pilot and then they come back for another pilot, saying that they're in trouble, they need more help to survive. And one of them, which they featured, was the Riverhead Aquarium. And in our previous, our planning conversations with Dave, I told him, I said, look, the Riverhead Aquarium needs to survive. If it doesn't survive, Riverhead, in some respects, doesn't survive. Because, when I grew up and I said I went to the aquarium, I went to Coney Island. That was the aquarium of record. And David can attest to this. We have young kids. And when we tell our friends we went to the aquarium, it is just understood that it is Riverhead. Yeah. Nobody's driving to Coney Island anymore. They're going to Riverhead. They're going to the aquarium. They're stopping at one of their fine lunch places because they have great restaurants now. Yep. It's a bustling downtown. There are microbreweries. There's a hotel to stay in. And it's important that an institution like an aquarium survive. And from an educational standpoint, it is not a bad thing that they get additional IDA benefits, because the IDAs recognize that without them surviving, Riverhead doesn't survive. So, that was kind of what I was explaining, is that there are certain cornerstones of town centers that are imperative, and IDAs make it feasible for them to continue on, especially museums and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think, Kyle, to your point. Oh, sorry, Harry.
Just quickly, the aquarium, like Kyle, I have a young daughter, and we spent many times going out to that aquarium, and it's a beautiful, beautiful facility. But the first time we went out there was the aquarium. Yeah. Next year we go out, there's a hotel breaking ground. Third time we go out, the hotel is built, there's a butterfly exhibit, butterfly cage. Every time we go out, there's more activity in that wonderful downtown they have. And that's why it's critical. You have that attraction, and it brings the additional investment in. And that's why you have to keep those types of facilities going, because they are the draw.
Yeah. Dave, you like to talk about history a lot, to further this point. The revitalization of Times Square didn't just happen on its own. Market forces didn't just magically turn Times Square from what a lot of us grew up with in the 80s to what it is today. I mean, when the Marriott Marquis was built, they built the reception area like 10 floors up because they didn't want vagrancy there. New York City had to come in and through various different ways incentivize and work with, New York City, the greatest city in the world. So the idea that, to Kyle's, point, the idea that a cultural institution, a tourist magnet, if you will, which is part of a larger East End ecosystem now, that I'm able to share, with my kids. When I went out to the East End, my aunt had a house in Greenport. We went to the IGA. That was a big day out. Like, that's what we did. And then we went to the beach. I had a great childhood. I'm not complaining. But I go out now and it's, which sushi restaurant am I gonna frequent in Greenport? What is that? Yeah. Aldo's Coffee has running water. When did that happen? It's transformed, and the jobs and the multiplier effects happen. Kelly, you had that amazing project with Matchbook Distillery out there. Mm-hmm. Again, the Greenport Brewery, other things that we're seeing. By the way, for everybody listening, there's no question we have the best beer, in America. I mean, the microbrews on Long Island. Am I right, Kelly?
Do not get him started on the microbrews.
Just so everybody's clear, Harry, I'm coming to you next. I have a great idea to support the microbrew industry.
Harry, call me. I'll fill you in. Don't take his call on this.
Get on board. Dave, get on board. It's great. But no, I mean, Kelly, I don't know if you want to talk about that project, but again, these are, these are the pieces to the puzzle.
No, you're absolutely right. Riverhead has gone through a huge transformation. Like, just like Patchogue.
Yeah, David remembers when Robert Moses was out there and it was just fields. I mean, tell us about Riverhead when you were young.
I do remember you couldn't see the river from the street over there, and now it's all nice wide open park space. But it's all of these. Look, even probably one of the most successful downtowns, at least in Suffolk, is Huntington Village, and even with the market rate apartments that have come in there, it keeps the retail open. It keeps a change of the different types of retail, like Kelly was mentioning. They're currently under construction for a hotel. I think the last hotel that was in Huntington was about 80 years ago, and it was where the TD Bank is on the corner of Fairfield. Kyle, you'll know it's next to Besito.
Great Mexican restaurant.
Yes.
And margaritas.
But David, back to your point about Riverhead is so when there are articles kind of demonizing, pilots for the Long Island Aquarium, it's our job to educate people to understand why that they are critical and that they're not a bad thing, but they're a good thing. I mean, just recently in Newsday, there was almost like 2 different articles reported with 2 different takes about an IDA in Nassau on Crevit. And Harry knows this deal well. Crevit is a national, if not global, international company. They have offices in Canada, in Chicago, and I think in North Carolina or South Carolina. But for 50 years, they've called Long Island home. It's 170 corporate HQ jobs here. And recently, the Long Island Railroad MTA bought their property, made an offer they couldn't refuse because they needed the parcel for a project that they're doing. So here, Crevit, corporate headquarters, has no home. They can literally uplift and move anywhere.
Right.
So why stay here? We're a high tax, high cost region. All the other things. They're the ones who the governors call up and say, "Come over here, free land, no tax.
Right.
We'd love to have you."
And they do that.
And the Nassau IDA recognizes that, gives them a deal. They, in fact, actually, they squeeze out 30-something more jobs. I think 35 more jobs they're required to bring in. And they're staying now, hopefully for another 50 years.
Yeah.
But why, when that gets reported in a negative light, it blows my mind. It makes no sense. We need to encourage them to stay because the jobs that they keep here, the high-paying corporate jobs, they're also investing that into our downtowns. They're investing into our retail shops. They're investing in their restaurants. It's just all funnels back into the economy here.
Yeah.
So.
Crevit actually came to us first, and because of the incredibly tight industrial market, lost the building that they had hoped for, and were fortunately able to find something in Nassau, and so we got to keep them in the region. But we're seeing a lot of that too, Dave, where last minute buildings are just disappearing out from under people because it's just so competitive.
No, it is. I know the Kravitz. I think actually the company's 100 years old, but they're multi-generational. I think the third generation is now in there. So yes, we do want to keep that. So what do we do? Let's just morph this into what can we collectively do? And I'm not talking about collectively the five of us. Collectively, all of us. I think there was like 150 people that are on this this presentation right now. What can we do? I mean, we want to help. We want, Kyle, you're mentioning we've got kids that are, still in school. We want them to have jobs, right? I don't want my kids to go to North Carolina and I'm up here. I'd like them to be able to stay here. What can we do as residents, right? I find that when I have a disagreement with someone, a lot of times it comes down to the data set of information we're dealing with. And the past year and a half has been a crazy year on a number of fronts: political, health, jobs, real estate changing. I mean, there's a lot of different things. So I find when everybody's dealing with the same set of facts, the opinions are much closer. So what can we do here so we don't have negative articles about Kravitz or, different companies or different sites, Zero Wire, Riverhead Aquarium? Like, what could we do? And I think people on here want to do something. So what can we do?
I guess I'll take that. For first and foremost is participate. A project like Kravitz, it's very hard for somebody who's not related to the actual deal to get excited about it, right? Unless you work there or unless you're, selling the property or buying the property, why would you come out and say something? When it comes to the need for multifamily housing and revitalizing our downtowns, it's really important that people voice their opinion. You can voice it on Facebook, you can voice it by telling your friends, especially voice it by telling your elected officials. But, there are often times where people are on blocks and one person on their neighbor is adamantly opposed to a project for whatever motive they have. And you sometimes might feel bullied to oppose it. You shouldn't. You should just say, hey, look, I think we need a revitalized downtown. I want to walk my family and go and have a bite to eat or stop by a microbrewery or have the retail shops and the young people above that make our community more desirable. That's what I really would say first and foremost is get more involved. A lot of people just sit on the sidelines and say, oh, it'll just work out. But no, it's not always the case. You need coalitions. You need people who are actively voicing their concerns and their opinions. And if you feel a certain way, don't hold back.
And there are multiple opportunities to offer those opinions. In our process, we have a 3-step process. There is a preliminary inducement. Company comes before our board. They present the project in detail, and there is a chance for public opinion at that moment. If the board likes the aspects of the project, they'll approve it, meaning they're giving the staff, me and my team, the chance to do some due diligence on it, analyze it, and come back with a recommendation. Then we move to a public hearing, which is exactly that. It's a chance for the public to come and comment on the project. Thirdly, then they come back to the board, in front of the board for final approval. And again, there's a chance for public comment. In addition to that, you can always write us, you can always email us. So there are multiple avenues to comment and get involved. People just need to be aware of them and take advantage of them.
Yeah, and I would just add, we have an identical process and also encouraged, it's always easier for the folks that are against the projects or that have negative things to say to come out. And they generally are the first. And the folks that don't have issue or are in support and agreement are the ones that are staying home and cooking dinner and taking care of everyday life. But it's critical that their voices are heard as well. And the board, I can say our board carefully reviews every comment that they received regarding any kind of project that we're doing before they take the final vote.
2 things to build off of that. Long Island has unfortunately been known as the land where good ideas go to die. And that is based on, a very effective and very loud, and in some cases well-organized minority of people who to Kyle's point, come out loud and quickly, and a more meaningful discussion of complex issues is never permitted to happen. Participating, not even just in IDA meetings, but participating in village board meetings or even school board meetings, help to provide elected officials the support they need to properly consider zoning changes and other things. It's for a lot of people who are motivated against things in general, it's just easier for them to find the time to come out. But one thing that the pandemic, I think, has permitted and has really kind of benefited IDAs, is this idea of, online meetings. These meetings, which, can be ministerial, are now much more available to people. And I think that, what we've seen too is people start tuning in and start participating. Kelly, you and I had heard from people in upstate, in particular, IDAs in upstate, they're getting a higher participation rate. And that's actually really helpful, because people are really starting to learn the process of what happens, and more importantly, how these boards work. Nassau and Suffolk, they're activist boards. There is no rubber stamp on a project. Each team, Harry's team, Kelly's team, they bring projects that really have merit. So it's not likely that you're going to see something that would be voted down, because the due diligence is so thorough ahead of time. But there's a lot of very, very heartfelt and important discussion that happens in these boards. And for people to start to see that, I think that there's an appreciation that, again, something that may be misconstrued by the media or simply by the opposition as a rubber stamp is anything but.
Yeah. And just to build off what Kyle was saying, not to be bullied, we do see these smaller groups forming. And a lot of what you're hearing is, they're just absolutely against development of any kind in a particular municipality. So it has nothing to do with the merits of the project or the need of that particular community. It reminds me of, I know, we're all familiar with the term NIMBY. But, is everyone familiar with banana? Build absolutely nothing near anybody. And that one came out a while ago, and I thought, that's... but it's right. It's
Well, the other thing I want to add in there is that because of COVID, I mean, one silver lining are Zooms. I mean, personally, people want to be in public and interact again, but in terms of Zooms, it's never been more easy to participate in government.
Yeah.
You can literally make dinner, feed your kids, do a bath, and the public hearing portion of the IDA hearing could be over, and you can raise your hand and speak and ask a question. You don't have to drive 30 minutes to 1550 Franklin Avenue and sit in a room for an hour for a presentation just to ask your question. So it's the commute time is next to zero, and the amount of time it takes to participate is next to zero. So it hopefully is encouraging that more people participate because of the Zoom technology. And who knows where we'll be after the pandemic, but there's a part of me that thinks all meetings will be broadcast on Zoom simultaneously in public, to give more people a chance to participate and actively be involved in their community. And on
sorry, Kyle.
The other point I want to make is, and just back to the bullying and whatnot, and the editorials that are factually incorrect about shifting the burden onto the residents, when in fact it reduces the burden on the residents. I say this, everyone's entitled to their own opinion, but they're not entitled to their own facts.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're a libertarian and you don't think government should be involved in economic development, that's fine, but don't misinterpret or misstate what's actually happening in that situation. And that also goes with a lot of the NIMBY groups or the local activists or minority groups that are against it, is they will make up anything to sway people onto their side. And it's important that everybody ask questions, do their research. And if you don't like the project, that's fine. But at least you came to an opinion looking at the facts, not on what somebody told you.
That's absolutely true. So one thing I do is, if somebody wants to initiate a conversation on something that that I don't think they have the correct facts, or maybe I don't have all the facts yet, I say, okay, I'm very willing to discuss this with you. Give me a couple of days. This is a topic. I'll get back to you. And every single time, and there's probably some of the people, my friends that are on here, they don't do that to me anymore because they check their facts now before they come over to me. Because more times than not, when you actually go through and get the facts, it's not what they thought it was. And they didn't even know that it wasn't what they thought because their source was leaning one way or leaning the other way. So, but here's one thing that's very important. And I instill this in, I'm still very involved in SIBS. Still this in SIBS. I even instill it with my kids, with people in my office, is you have to individually get involved. Look, I'm a successful real estate broker. I don't need a part-time job. I'm on the Huntington Planning Board. So it's every other Wednesday, for an hour or two. Sometimes it gets more, to understand that I needed to understand the municipal side of this, because I do a lot of land sales. I work with Kyle a lot and a lot of his membership that are developing these pieces. And if you sort of learn how to navigate something and you know what's important and what needs to be done, you do it before you go in. And it's whether you're on a village board, the planning board, zoning board, any of these other boards, you've got to get involved. You've got to get involved. So everybody who's listening to this, you're heads and tails above everybody else by spending the 2.5 hours here with us. Get involved when the opportunity, the school board, just get involved with what's going on. And what Kyle's saying is absolutely true. Do not get bullied. You can control the situation. Like I said, hey, I'll get back to you in 2 days and let's have this discussion when I research it a little bit better. So, but we do need to move forward, and we need to be able to not have companies, feel like, you know what? I don't want to start the process here. It's like, they're almost, defeated. It's like, and I'm like, no, let me get you on the phone with Kelly or Harry. And Kelly, we did it recently. I got you on the phone, and the company was it's almost like, just show me that you care, almost like to the region. Just show me that you'll take the phone call and that you're nice to me, because these other areas are flying them all over the place. So we need to have at least the minimal amount of respect, appreciation that the companies are here and staying here. It is expensive to be here, living here and running a business. But we need, we need to do that. So, so can we associate with every time that you guys let out a press release, like say Cravat, right? Can you send out a this much of private investment for this much of a benefit? Is there a way that you guys can consistently tie that so that becomes, the message? Because Cravat bought a building, they furnished the building, they moved their employees over there, they updated, I know these guys very well. They spent a lot of money over there that totally eclipses the amount of the benefit. But can we do that? Can we have a best practices for dealing with the media, the public, and the politicians?
I think, and I'll move to David, but I think we tried very hard to do that in writing these press releases. Again, not everybody is going to pick them up, and they're going to change and include the facts or the salient points that they would prefer. But we tried very hard to do that. We also take many of these complicated or controversial projects and do case studies and put those on our website. We have a very robust, website that was newly created. It's a year old now, but it took us over a year to create, and it's interactive, and it has analytic ability. And so we send out evergreen email campaigns and try to drive people and really analyze it and look at it. But all that being said, of all the folks on the call, I'd be curious to know how many have even seen those emails or been on our website. So I think you're right. I mean, it's just a huge challenge for us to get that positive word out. I think, and I've said this over and over, IDA, what we do is complicated and complex. And oftentimes when we have to justify or explain, by the time we've gotten to that point, people's eyes have completely glazed over and they just have completely moved on. So it's always, and David will tell you, we've been trying to distill the message down. And to your point, the number one thing we try and do is get people to call us. Just call me, because if they call me, then I know that, and I know Harry feels the same way, that we can help them. We can find someone to help them. When we see clients, we go in with a whole team. We don't just go in the Suffolk IDA. I call, Kara Longworth at ESD and John Keating at PSE&G and Lausbar at National Grid and Department of Labor and, workforce being a huge component. And we go in as a team, and it's a really impressive way to greet a CEO or principal of a company. But we have to find a better way.
Yeah, I think, Dave, to your point, James Medora has been cited previously in this, and I think that the business community on Long Island is greatly served by having someone cover the IDAs, but also cover a lot of the major goings on for Newsday with real institutional knowledge and a willingness to sit down. At the end of every meeting, Harry and his team, Kelly and her team, they sit down with James and go over the specific numbers. And generally speaking, as we all know, reporters don't write headlines. Didn't love the headline today, but at some point I will find, after my 25 years in PR, I will find the headline writer in Newsday and give them a piece of my mind. Because it's not just ITAs, it's a lot of other things. But we're lucky enough to have somebody who has that level of institutional knowledge. In my early years in PR, Newsday had a lot of those individuals, people like Irv Long, obviously the great Rick Brand, who covered Suffolk County politics, who's recently retired. There are still, people like Joy Brown there who, have come up through the ranks and have this institutional knowledge. But what happens is, to Kelly's point, is that the message gets lost every time you add a comma or a period to the statement that you're trying to make. And I think, Dave, you're correct in that, it's a constant but necessary uphill battle to continue to, prove the return on investment and to show people where this is going. Kelly in particular has pushed us to do more with case study work, especially with Broadridge Financial or Canon USA or Contract Pharmacal. I love Contract Pharmacal. I mean, you're talking about somebody who has blown away every job estimate that they've ever written for the IDA. That's a homegrown company. That's a partnership from inception. How many buildings do they have now, Kelly?
They have 12.
12 buildings.
12 buildings.
Generic pharmaceutical manufacturing.
In a garage in the father's house.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible. It's a Grumman story, right? Grumman started in the garage in Baldwin. This is another garage story.
Yeah, 1,400 employees right now.
Yeah, it's incredible. So I think, trying to continue to get people to understand a lot of, there's a lot of education work also with elected officials. Elected officials get elected and they don't necessarily have, the entire playbook for everything that they're doing. And there's a tremendous learning curve. So I think IDAs, have worked aggressively with members of the legislature, state, local, to try to get them up to speed with, the impacts and willingness to work with. But there's always more that can be done. We're trying to be more surgical in the way in which we advertise, because, the average retail business isn't going to qualify for IDA benefits. That just isn't something that happens. However, I will say that both IDAs in particular and others on Long Island have really been inventive in trying to meet the needs of developing, sectors. We talked about startups, Harry and his team meeting just day-to-day concerns with local downtowns, with simple things like PPE distributions. These two IDAs are where people need them at that time in some respects, and then that's been great too. But more always has to be done to continue to bang away on the return on investment. as the process continues.
So we just have a couple of minutes here, and then we're gonna open it up to some questions. With Empire State Development, if the company wants to come to New York or is thinking about coming to New York and wants to explore it, what do they call the governor's office first? Like how does that normally come in? Does it go in through New York State Development and then to you? What's that path?
It can come in many forms. It could come into us and then we forward it on. I think Kelly made one of the most critical points is we have to pick up the phone. We have to answer the phone. We've gotten some feedback. We're a completely new team at the NASA IDA. And I think one of the greatest compliments we've gotten since we've been a team is that people find us to be approachable and they find that to be refreshing. And I'm not disparaging any prior IDA teams in the county, but just the fact that we're willing to take a meeting, we're willing to hear you out. We may not be able to help you. We may not be able to provide you the incentives, but we'll point you in the right direction. We'll try and get you the resources you need. We'll try and help network the relationship. So I think the critical thing is just picking up the phone. And sometimes the referrals come down from the state. Other times they come up from a village. They come from all different. Sometimes they come from our legislators who have a company in their district that they want us to just spend some time with. So it comes from a lot of different sources.
Okay.
Agreed.
So we just in sort of wrapping this up. So we have, I don't know exactly who's on with us, but we've invited a bunch of the media. What do we want to say here, sort of like is our, closing statements to, this topic? And again, the topic, Zen and the art of the Industrial Development Agency, you guys have a very, very important job. It's a difficult job. It's a public facing job which makes it more challenging. It seems in an altruistic society, everybody would sort of help others position in the best way that they possibly can. That doesn't happen as frequently as we'd like. So just sort of like closing statements from each of you. Again, anybody.
I lost you for a second.
We're on closing statements.
We're on closing statements.
All right, you want me to start, David?
Yeah.
Well,
Yes.
first statement is never show up to a Zoom without a tie. All these people on this call, they don't know what they're doing. I'm wondering if the Stony Brook is going to take back the accreditation of this program because of the lack of formal wear. But besides that, I would say this. I'd say, look, IDAs are a critical tool in our region's economic tool belt. They are an instrument that provides companies and developers the ability to attract financing and put together projects or retain companies which otherwise would leave the region. And that these IDAs, particularly, NASA and Suffolk who are here, they're good actors. What Harry said was very important. They are accessible, but they still have to, and they still do, look at a deal with a critical eye and determine whether it is an economic benefit for the region. What makes Harry and Kelly and the IDAs in Long Island, it's not only that you're accessible, but you're transparent, and you don't string people along. You don't people say to a developer or a company, we can do this, but not actually deliver. Harry knows what the limits are. He knows what's a reasonable pilot or a reasonable package that benefits Nassau County. And that's what he can do. And if that works in your algorithm for making a project viable, your rate of return, then you may proceed. But these agencies, when they are upfront and tell you what they can and can't do, that's the most valuable tool to my folks, my developers, because they need to know, all right, what value can I get by using the IDA that makes the financials work. So that's what I would add on this type of thing. And the last thing in terms of education, and in terms of what you read, come to your own conclusions, learn the facts. A lot of these deals are very, very critical to our long-term viability, and that a lot of the information that you may receive is secondhand or factually incorrect. So I really strongly encourage for people to participate, to read up. If it impacts you personally, do some research on your own. I mean, like I said, Cravat may not be a deal that excites you. It's in Plainview or Bethpage and has nowhere near your home in Seaford. But it is a benefit, and you should be aware that these things do exist and they're good for the region. And that's it.
All right, good.
And I'd like to thank you for the platform to dispel some of those misconceptions. I just want to clarify for Kelly that the reason David Chauvin loves microbreweries so much is he needs something good to go along with the McRib.
Thank you.
Not
Aaron.
something that needs to be incentivized, but the McRib is an essential economic accelerator.
We've spent too much time discussing the McRib in the past.
Good to know.
I
It's not good to know, Kelly. That's something that we don't need to know.
Oh, come on, Kyle. You know
Too
you're
much
okay.
information.
I think the thing I'd like to leave everybody with is it really does take a village. We don't operate in a vacuum. We're not behind closed doors, in secrecy. We're working collaboratively and in the open, and we welcome all input.
Great.
Good.
And I would say, just, as a government agency, we're a public benefit agency, right? So we're always looking for a return on our investment on behalf of the constituents in our municipalities. And that is, private capital investment and job creation and retention. And I, for one, as a professional economic developer, I'm passionate about the work that I do. I believe in what I do. I will talk to and talk about it, as David both know, with anybody. And if you do need to check your facts, if you do have an opinion about a project or a question, you can call Harry or I. I mean, it doesn't even have to be submitted as a part of the public record. If you want to understand something, anyone on this call, please reach out to us, because it really does take a village. And in these strange and unusual times, more than ever, we need to work together to build this economic foundation and create housing for the workers of the future and for your children, and so that these companies continue to grow and prosper and stay here on Long Island.
I would just add to foremost, obviously, continue to endorse the McRib. But second, I would also, just dovetail on what Kelly said. The IDA and its inception in 1969 was faced with very different challenges than what Kelly and Harry are facing today. And I think what's important for this audience to understand is that they don't just run and head up agencies. They are economic development professionals. And they and their teams look at things in a much more holistic way than I think, IDAs did even as little as 10 years ago. And so, dealing with modern challenges, dealing with complex situations, dealing with, organized oppositions, there's only so many hours in the day with everything that needs to be accomplished, yet they are constantly moving the ball down the field, and they are constantly addressing these myriad issues, facing the region: tourism, local downtowns, multifamily housing, the need for industrial, pharmaceutical clusters, redevelopment, long dormant projects that haven't gone anywhere. Even during a pandemic, both agencies didn't miss a beat and rose to the occasion, offering different incentive packages and opportunities for existing clients to retool their manufacturing facilities to meet the crisis, or just simply being at ground level, distributing essential PPE supplies, hosting virtual events, doing different things. IDAs 10, 15 years ago, they'd hold a meeting every month. Maybe they would do a project. Maybe they wouldn't. Maybe they'd have a discussion. IDAs now, to Kyle's point, they're probably forever virtual. if only because of state statute, but certainly because they want to be and want to be available. But you guys are operating on so many different levels now, and interacting with so many different things. And I want to thank, the Real Estate Institute. Dave, you've mentioned SIBS multiple times. Obviously, Kyle with ABLI, the LIA, Mitch Pally and Libby. So many economic development organizations throughout the landscape that have a really significant voice, and in most cases are not shy. We really appreciate that, because I think slowly and generationally, the landscape on Long Island is starting to change. I don't want to say there's less opposition. I think that there are, we're seeing changes in certain areas where people are more willing to listen and to recognize that you can't just say no anymore. And that, we still have to overcome, the 30,000 manufacturing jobs that we lost in the early 90s, that all started in a garage in Baldwin. So, but thank you very much.
So, when I have conversations with some of these people in different formats, I often say to them, look, be a voice. Don't just be an echo repeating what everybody else is saying. Do some research. Today is so much easier to research anything than it was when Kyle was little. And
You got to get me back, David. I appreciate that.
I know. I think I can mute you. Hold on.
You were almost out of time. I was wondering when you were going to go back.
One thing that I could say is, I'm a moderator, right? So I shouldn't be having the closing statement, but the world is changing. And if there's an apartment building next to an office building, before you start, complaining and belly aching that that's not what it's supposed to be, try to understand why that is happening. There is real reasons. Like we're going through, I was part of an effort with Melville, which is a very successful 9 million square foot business park, to include a multifamily residential zone within the park. So yes, it's different than what we've seen. Actually, I think we coined the phrase, David Winselberg and I, from Long Island Business News, of an employment-oriented district versus a transit-oriented district, which is near a train station. But this is where, if there's a young couple, they might only need one car because someone's walking to work and the other spouse is driving, to somewhere else. So what I could just say is to the residents is, if there's new development happening, a last mile that's in your neighborhood, if there's multifamily coming in the neighborhood, 55 and over, market rate or whatever it is, be a little bit more inquisitive and a little bit less judgmental, initially. Find out what it is. And again, get involved. There's plenty of boards. A lot of these boards are, they're either volunteer, some of them are, are paid, for service, but we need leaders. And again, I think the people that are viewing this. All right, so we're going to jump to just a couple of questions. So number one, Kyle, I'm sure you're going to want to talk about this. So, we're talking about the difficulty of developers getting projects off the ground, even with IDA programs. So how do you guys view the tagging the prevailing wage onto public incentives?
Prevailing wage. Okay. So I don't know how many people who are watching are familiar with prevailing wage, but essentially
about what it is.
So essentially, prevailing wage is the wage paid for a public works project. Organized labor receives a state mandated wage on any project that mostly receives public funding, whether it be your roads, your buildings within public schools, higher educational institutions. All those are paid a certain state mandated wage. What Albany and New York State Legislature and the governor signed last year was legislation that requires prevailing wage be paid on private development that receives over 30% in public benefit. So if you're building, let's say, a multifamily housing development that's $100 million and you receive $30 million and 1 cent in public benefit, that triggers that the whole job, that the wages have to be paid in prevailing wage, unless you agree to a collective bargaining agreement or a PLA with the trades and you don't pay the full freight of prevailing wage. But that's what was passed pre-pandemic in all, actually during the pandemic. It happened last year in 2020's legislative session. What does that mean for Long Island? Well, first, it's unclear whether that the effective date, which is January 1, 2022, will actually be the start date for the legislation. There are triggers in the state's legislation that that allow it to be postponed. One, if they think it would be a negative economic impact, they can then decide to postpone it. Two is there's a public subsidy board that needs to be created with board members to determine what the total project construction costs contain, and that is yet to be done. So, you know, from the most part, you know, right now I would say it's kind of on the shelf. Once we have more clearer picture, sure, there might be a large rush to go to IDAs to get projects induced before January 1, 2022. But right now it's kind of unclear on what impact it'll have. The last thing I'll say on prevailing wage is the 30% threshold. There's a floor of how big of an IDA deal it has to be. I think it's a $5 million deal or above. So a lot of the local industrial or commercial companies that seek IDA benefits, they don't normally crack that threshold. It's mostly the multifamily housing projects that are the larger deals. Would you agree with that, Kelly?
Yes, I would.
And Harry? There are instances like Hart's Mountain that
Right.
receive large packages, but those are really kind of transformative projects.
Mhm.
The majority are of a lower threshold. But look, developers, if it goes into law, will have to work around the parameters of the legislation, and IDA benefits, you'll see probably a lot within the 25 to 29.99 threshold. Because unfortunately, or fortunately, whatever side you're on, paying prevailing wage is a very costly endeavor. And it most likely will sink any financing you can get for a project. So real estate will adjust. If it is enacted on January 1, 2022, but that's yet to be determined, and that's it.
So other than the cost with prevailing wage, there's an accounting burden as well, right? That it's not like you just say, okay, I pay prevailing wage, and then you don't have to talk to anybody ever again. You've got to account, you know, at least from what I understood, you got to account for that.
Yeah, I mean, look, you need to pay prevailing wage, and if there's a dispute on the wage, there's always been a Department of Labor panel when there's wage disputes that will, you know, rule on whether a developer paid what they said they were supposed to pay.
Right. Okay. All right. So one of the viewer questions is that after you give benefits, is there an accounting, or does somebody keep track of the company to make sure that they're doing everything that they say they were going to do?
Yes, there is. There's a very robust, extensive process. We are heavily regulated by the authority's budget office and the New York State Controller's office. So as a result of that, we enter into a contractual agreement with every single one of our clients. As part of that contract, they're required on an annual basis to report to us a variety of things. We're in compliance reporting right now, which is always a challenging time of year, especially through COVID, just, you know, getting the paperwork returned to us. So what we require and what the state requires is that they report on the number of jobs. And again, this ties back to, right, what we said, it's private capital investment and job creation. So when they promise or commit to creating jobs, we take a baseline and we verify that with what's called the New York State 45. So we tie it directly to a document. We just don't take their word for it. Then each year they have to produce that document and ascertain what the number of jobs is and the total payroll amount. If there was sales tax that was provided or mortgage recording tax exemption, we require certification of those items as well. And that process takes place for whatever length of time the pilot is ongoing. So if it's a 10-year pilot, we're in that relationship for 10 years and they're reporting all of that. One thing that we do as the Suffolk IDA that is not required by the state, but we do require it of our clients, is that they have to report to us what their local capital expenditure is. We like to see all of the companies in the local market area, which is Nassau and Suffolk, and an aggregate amount of spending, because that speaks back, David, to your multiplier effect. We like to see how much of that is going back into the economy. And all of this information is entered into a system called Paris through New York State and available to each and every citizen in the state. So if you wanted to see any one of our projects, you would go on to the authority's budget office website, and you would be able to pull up all of the reports. You know, people talk a lot, and I'll let Harry speak to it as well, about our, transparency and accountability. And I can't tell you, we are more heavily regulated and transparent than any agency that you know, with small staffs. Harry's staff of 7, I'm quite jealous of. We're a staff of 3.5. And there's 4 people, but it's 3.5 FTEs. So heavy regulation and plenty of information available. And all of it actually is on our websites as well, as required by New York State. Did I leave anything out, Harry?
I think one critical component to mention is that there is a recapture provision.
Yes.
So if we find that somebody is committed to maintaining 100 jobs and they fall short of that and they don't have a plan to get back to that level, we have the option of terminating the agreement and recapturing a percentage of the benefits that were paid. And there's a formula for that. And when we recapture those funds, we don't retain those funds. Those funds go back right out as if they were a tax payment to the local jurisdictions in the same allocation as if they were paid tax. So we do have the ability to enforce those requirements and also recapture some of the benefits. At the end of the day, if you want to work with the IDA, there's no free meal. You're subjecting yourself to significant accounting. You're having to come to public meetings and speak about your project and make these commitments. So it's really quite a commitment on their part.
Yeah, it is.
So looks like we have a SUNY Stony Brook student question. Is there anything in the IDA that it does or could do to help young professionals, recent college graduates to stay or to come here on Long Island?
Well, I think the first thing I'll jump in on is housing. As Kelly said, it's critical that not only do we have some affordable housing, but we have a diversity of housing options. We haven't really touched on transit-oriented development. Kyle spoke earlier about walkable downtowns. We have a number of downtowns. They all have a different flavor to them. So I think providing, 1, just housing options, and 2, affordable housing is critical. But we also want to make sure that we're attracting the companies here who could employ those graduating students as they graduate. Pharma is a great one for chemical engineering students and the like. So we look closely at who are our current graduates, what are the degrees they're getting, and where we can, we help to match them up with companies. A lot of companies, Kelly said earlier, one of the things we hear is employees on the lower end of the pay scale can't afford to live here. And gee, if I can get more employees, I could open up another production line and I can grow my company. I just can't get the folks here. But it's also letting people know and make them aware of, the younger folks, of the different job opportunities they hear. Who knows what Crevette is? Crevette's not a household name, but there are some really interesting, dynamic companies here that offer great opportunity.
Right.
And I would just add workforce development training to that. Workforce development is an economic development initiative. And, we've been looking towards creating places where we can work more directly with the companies and with the schools, and the synergy between, because it's so important that young people understand that manufacturing is a huge business here in the region. And as Harry said, there's low-paying jobs, but there are companies like Estee Lauder where you can start at minimum wage and work your way through, and they have tuition assistance available, and promoting from within is part of their corporate culture. So we're trying to do more with the county's economic development and the Department of Labor in terms of really getting the information out about how the pipeline and workforce development operates in the region.
All right, good. So we have two viewer comments, one directed at me and one directed at Kyle. So first one.
I responded to one of them.
The first one is, if you're showing 50 American flags in your background, you don't need a tie. That was to me. And one of the other viewers said, in respect and support for Kyle, he actually put on a tie.
There you go.
Well, with that, I want to thank you guys. It's been, 2 hours, right? That's not easy to do. We've covered a lot. I'm sure we've answered as many questions as maybe we've created questions. So I urge our viewers to reach out to our panelists and look at their website. Kelly's mentioned hers numerous times, so I certainly would look at hers. But thank all of you very much, because this is, we need to do more of these. We need to get this tide changing so that, the IDA coming out, is sort of like the savior here, this is what we need. But thank you each for sharing your beautiful Friday. It's gorgeous outside, so I'll give you each the afternoon off.
Thank you.
Dave, thank you.
David, thank you for starting this important conversation and being such a great advocate for IDAs.